me, it's the economy and how we're going to get that re-established and back on track.
I would say the housing crisis, especially as a young student in Wellington. I think it's really important to be able to afford to actually live here so that we can study.
I think the welfare of New Zealanders in general. It's not about money or economy, it's about physical health, mental health.
I think we're just in uncharted territories, and it's pretty hard to put a priority on something until we actually get some certainty around what's happening with that pandemic.
The one issue would be climate change and health, because I think they are linked.
The health systems, if there is another health in the economy, basically.
Well, climate change would be the most important issue for me.
Economic recovery from COVID.
National.
I haven't decided yet. I'm still kind of on the fence of a few, just trying to educate myself, figure out where I stand.
I'm not decided yet, but probably I'll vote strategically.
I have, yes, but I'm not telling you. You can guess.
I will vote for Labour, possibly a Green Party vote. There's still time to make my mind up.
I'm not sure yet. I haven't really made my decision.
National. Both my parents are National supporters, so I've always grown up around National, and I consider myself quite conservative. So
I'll be Labour Party vote Green.
It's a pretty hard one, but I think I am quite sold by our Prime Minister, so yeah, I would be voting Labour.
Ardern, I think, very clearly again, because she seems to be doing a good job. She's a rare example of a skilled, thoughtful politician in an age when around the world we see nothing but trouble backed up by lies and deceit. So I think New Zealand has one thing to be proud of, is that good governance is on display here. You don't see that too often around the world. No?
Well, Jacinda, yes, I think everyone says that. Though I must say Judith Collins has had a jolly good go at it. She's really making an effort. And they are both women, which is a good thing.
Judith Collins.
Jacinda.
Ardern.
Jacinda Ardern.
Jacinda Ardern, yes.
I would have to say Jacinda.
Ardern.
Neither, but I'd have to say Collins, purely on partisanship.
We will keep New Zealand safe. National is confident, future-focused and excited by the possibility and opportunity ahead for this great country.
The government that I lead will be a government that listens and then acts. I will never stop believing that politics is a place where we can do good.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the press editor and one of your hosts for the evening, Kamala Heyman.
Kia ora, e ngā mana, e ngā reo, e pauama, e tauama, e rau rangatira mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Nā mai haere mai tātou ki te tohi tohi a te matatika. Nā mai e ngā kaiarahio te pāti reipa me te pāti na hinara. Wharikatia mai ngā korero kia eke ai tā tātou kaupapa. Good evening and welcome to the Press Leaders Debate here in my hometown, the beautiful city of Ōtautahi, Christchurch. I'm Kamala Heyman, editor of the Press in Stuff Canterbury, and it is my privilege to be hosting the Leaders' Debate tonight with Stuff political editor Luke Malpass. Shortly, we'll be joined on stage by two of the most influential figures in New Zealand, Prime Minister and leader of the Labour Party, Jacinda Ardern, and leader of the National Party, Judith Collins. But first, before I invite them on stage, I'll outline the rules of engagement for tonight. We will begin with a 2-minute statement from each of our leaders before Luke and I put them through their paces with a series of questions. Some advice to our leaders. Your answers will be watched closely by Stuff's Whole Truth team. Any misleading statements will be identified and they will be corrected and they'll be published on Stuff within 48 hours. Yeah. And there will be an opportunity for audience questions in the second half of our debate. To contribute, anyone in the live audience or at home watching on Stuff can contribute. Go to slido.com, that's slido.com. On your phone, type in the event code LD2020. You can suggest a question anonymously if you wish, or you can vote up another question if you like it. We encourage you to do this whether you're watching at home or in our live audience right up until the end of intermission. Now, around 8 p.m, there will be this 15-minute break. You can get up, stretch your legs, and during that time, Stuff's head of video, Carol Hirschfeld, will analyse the first half performance with Leanne Watson, Canterbury Employers Chamber of Commerce, and Senior Lecturer in Politics at Canterbury University, Dr. Lindsay Te Ato Oto McDonald. Until then, sit back and enjoy the only leaders' debate to be held here in the South Island before a large live audience. I know our spirited Canterbury crowd here at the James Hay Theatre will ensure our two leaders are held to account as we challenge them with the questions Kiwis want answered. The question for you is, will their performance tonight change the way you vote? Let's find out. Please join me in a warm welcome for my co-host, Luke Malpass. And Judith Collins and Jacinda Ardern. Welcome.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's terrific to have so many people here. We want tonight to be a free-flowing debate with little interjection from us, the moderators. Now, our job is to steer and to rein in when needed. So in 5 blocks this evening, we'll be exploring the following issues. COVID and economic recovery. The second section will be on Canterbury and the South Island. The third section will be the environment, New Zealand society and Te Ao Māori. The fourth section will be your questions from the audience and subscribers. And the fifth question will be on the cost of living, poverty and housing. So without further ado, let's get into it. By virtue of a coin toss, Judith Collins will be opening the debate by giving us a 2-minute statement. That means that Jacinda Ardern will conclude the debate in the closing statements at the end. Ms. Collins, welcome. Your 2 minutes begin now.
Thank you. First, can I start by acknowledging Ngāi Tahu? Can I also acknowledge the people of Lake Oahu, who at the moment are going through very difficult times. I'd like to acknowledge the press, and obviously all those people who are here tonight. I'd also like to acknowledge the other MPs, and particularly Ms. Ardern, and I'd also like to acknowledge Jerry Brownlee, because I know he and the press have got such a close relationship. I've said to Jerry, no more public displays of affection, please, Jerry. But all joking aside, this is the most important election that we will ever face. It is an election where we decide not what's going to happen in the next few days, not what's going to happen in the next 3 months, but what's going to happen in the next 3 years. And the most important issue for this election is about the economic recovery for New Zealand. New Zealand's not unlike every other part of the world. We're all going through tough times, but we're a small economy and we have to try harder than everyone else. And everyone in Canterbury knows about having to try hard. You've been through tough times, there are still tough times, and I'm not going to call you resilient because you're sick of being told it. You just want to get on. It is really important that we vote for a government that has a plan to build our economy. And there's a plan around tax cuts for people in the average wages, people who get $3,000 for $64,000 income. It's really important that we grow the economy with that, an adrenaline pump into the heart of the economy. But it's also important to build infrastructure for our children and grandchildren. whether it's the Pegasus bypass to Belfast, whether or not that happens, whether it's the Ashburton Road, the 4-laning, whether or not that happens is going to depend on which government is in place. Our government has a plan for it. Our party has a plan for it. We need to build for the future, not to look back at the past.
Thank you, Judith Collins. Jacinda Ardern.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, and it is wonderful to be here in this beautiful town hall. I bet it feels like a global pandemic was the last thing Canterbury needed. You've had your fair share of challenges, you know, whether it was in the face of disaster or in the face of terror. You have shown the rest of the country what strength and what unity looks like. And we've learnt from that. And we need to use that now in the wake of COVID-19 and in our rebuild. But there are lessons that must be learnt too. The quake rebuild here took too long, and there is still more to do. My government took quick and decisive action when it came to COVID-19. We went hard and early in our health response because we knew that would be good for the economy too. We saved jobs, we saved businesses through the wage subsidy. Now, I'm not claiming perfection, but you only need to look at the rest of the world to see how that plan has stacked up and what a difference it's made. And our collective efforts have meant that we now have an economic head start. Our economy is growing again already. We're seeing our exporters posting strong results. And just as we did with the rebuild here, there will be opportunities that we need to grasp hold of. We need to apply the same thinking now, getting both immediate and short-term gains whilst also planning for the future and getting wins for the environment, getting wins for our communities at the same time. We mustn't squander hard-won gains. Now, I'll say it directly. A change of course and instability risks the progress that we are making right now. You've seen up close how I operate as a government. It's about jobs, it's about training. These are all things that are proudly happening right here in Canterbury. I'm looking forward to talking in more detail about the rest of that plan tonight.
Jacinda Ardern, I'd like to take you back to January, when COVID was still a largely unknown disease in a land far away. What would you do differently if you knew then what you know now?
I think every leader around the world would have something that they would have moved earlier on, knowing what we know now. But even then, Luke, relative to others, we were amongst the first to close our borders, amongst the first to use quarantine in the way we did, and moving fast and early, going hard and early, has led to other countries reflecting on what we have collectively done. So probably sliding those things a bit earlier would be my response to that, but ultimately though, I'm proud of our response to COVID-19. It means that we can all gather here in the town hall tonight.
Judith Collins, what should the government have done differently?
Well, in February we were calling for the borders to be considered to be closed. It actually took another month for that to happen. And at the time when we were asking for this and talking about COVID-19, we were told that we were scaremongering. We were told that we were scaremongering, and we had David Clark, the then Minister of Health, coming out saying in Parliament that all we needed to really do is to think about hygiene and sneezing into our elbows. We raised those questions then. We raised issues about masks. We raised issues about what was going to happen, because we had seen what was going on, particularly in Wuhan in China. And actually, we didn't go fast and hard and early. Samoa went a month earlier than us. Other countries, Samoa did so go.
That is factually
correct. It did so. And actually, don't disrespect Samoa. They did it. They kept it out. They kept it out.
Jacinda Ardern,
COVID-19 out, and they've kept it out, and by the way, they test anybody who wants to get on a plane to go there, and we have not done that. Actually, I don't take kindly to people disrespecting the hard work of the Samoans. They had to take it seriously because...
Thank you, Judith. Jacinda Ardern, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, I would. Look, actually, when it comes to our Pacific neighbours, we've worked hand in glove as a region. But actually, the point, Luke, I wanted to make was this is directly contrary. What I'm hearing from Judith tonight is directly contrary to their criticism that we should have opened the borders to Australia and China early. We should have lifted our restrictions early. We have been criticised by the National Party every step of the way for our COVID response. Now, when you are in a pandemic, you cannot afford to change your mind every 5 minutes. Every leader we've had from National has had a different position, and it's been wrong.
If Miss Ardern would like to go back and have a look at what was said, it was nothing like what she's just said. It is actually really serious to understand this, is that our country is facing the worst economic times in 160 years, and that's according to the Reserve Bank Governor. So he has said that. And we've got this sort of silly talk about who said what when. I can tell you this. We can't continue to go down a path of having no proper plan for the border, which we have from Miss Ardern's party, except that they want to keep it shut. Unless, of course, you're an Australian rugby player, in which case they can sort it out then for you.
We've actually gone around the country and asked stuffed readers what they care about in this space, and now we'll play you the first of those questions.
Hi, my name is Suchi and I'm a business retailer in Ponsonby, Auckland. In total, Auckland has been in lockdown for almost 10 weeks, level 4 and then level 3. At what point do these lockdowns become unfeasible?
At what point do further lockdowns become unfeasible?
Oh, well, ultimately, though, without them, then we would be living with COVID-19. And that equally, if you look around the world, would mean hospitality closed, people working from home for months on end. It would mean retail, not seeing people in their stores. So we have to remember the counterfactual is much, much worse. We don't want to use lockdowns any more than is absolutely necessary to keep people safe and to reopen the economy. We have had roughly 9 weeks worth. We've had 22 weeks of wage subsidy to support small business owners. What we need to do, though, Luke, is continue to roll out a plan that means we have the open economy we have now compared to the likes of France and UK.
Oh, come on. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. No, it is just reinventing history. The fact is that the lockdown should not have been necessary if people had been tested, as we were told. That second lockdown that we had, which locked down even the South Island into level 2, totally unnecessary. If the testing that Miss Ardern told us on the 23rd of June was happening to all border-facing staff, turned out 2 months later, actually only a third of them had been tested. It was a failure of border protection that caused that lockdown, and I'm not going to have Miss Ardern stand there and just reinvent history. Judith. That's the point. And as for lockdowns, weren't necessary in Taiwan. Why? 23 million people, because they tested, because they did exactly what they said they were going to do, because they used Bluetooth technology, because they actually take it seriously. And then to let people come in on planes with COVID-19, that is disgraceful. It's still happening today.
The idea that somehow returning New Zealanders will come back into this country completely free of COVID-19 is a dreamland. Of course, New Zealanders coming in, that is why we have a quarantine system and one of the most robust in the world.
And why aren't they paying for it?
It is completely incorrect. It is completely incorrect to say that there was a failure that led to that outbreak.
Well, where did it come from? Under in a rock in your garden?
We have never been able to identify the source. Right. And if I may finish on this, Luke, according to Judith, putting Jerry Brownlee in charge of the border is the answer.
Well, it's better
I know people in this room believe that it's not true.
Hey, it's a lot better than putting David Clark in charge of health and then sending him on holiday for 2 months during a pandemic.
We'll move on to more of the economic response now. Now, Jacinda Ardern, in your COVID response, your government has really taken a government-led approach. Shovel-ready projects, big government spending response. National has decided that the best economic stimulus is tax cuts. Why is your approach better?
Well, because obviously investing in infrastructure creates jobs, but that's not the only approach. We want to support our exporters as well. Already we're seeing an export-led recovery. Dairy, kiwi fruit,
oh, now
wine,
you like dairy.
All doing well. And at the same time, Luke, supporting our small businesses. You know, digital vouchers that give them funding to continue the technological advancement we've already seen. The small business loan scheme, R&D tax credit, this all supports innovation and growth. That's the kind of investment we need right now. A tax cut is an unaffordable sugar hit that is just not right for these times.
Judith Collins, why tax cuts?
Because people need it, actually, and it is for 16 months. It is absolutely needed. We need people to be out stimulating the economy. We also need businesses to be able to buy better equipment, plant and equipment, and to be able to get that in place and written off as fast as they can, because that will encourage them to employ people. We also have Job Start. We have Business Start, we also have Skill Start. It's about getting people back into work. And as for the infrastructure, yeah, we'll do the infrastructure, and that's part of the plan. And that's part of why we need to have a national-led government, because it's not just government doing things. I'll tell you what we won't be doing. We won't be funding, if I got a chance, but unfortunately Ms Ardern's government's gone and signed off. We would never have agreed to a green school, private school in New Plymouth, while we've got state schools suffering, and a green school for kids whose parents are paying $20,000 a year. Actually, those people deserve an apology.
Let's come to services then. Let's come to health. Let's come to education and have that discussion.
Let's do
because
that.
I absolutely fail to see
$4.8 billion.
I fail to see how in the National Fiscal Plan, which has left how much, Judith, is in your operating allowance for health, for education next year.
Hey, at least we've got a plan.
How much?
It's an extra one. It's 800
How
million.
much?
800 million above it. And actually, I know mine off because I've actually got a plan.
800 million. We had to put 900 million into our DHBs alone to keep the lights on.
Well, why did you...
What will be cut?
Why did you
That's
get rid of the chief executive of Canterbury District Health Board?
What will be cut?
We'll come to that.
We'll come to that. There's plenty of time. I'm sure the people of Canterbury will appreciate there's plenty of time to get to DHBs.
Oh, let's talk about that.
Now, coming on to your particular government's budget approach over COVID. Now, Jacinda Ardern, your government voted itself $52 billion to deal with COVID, at least $14 billion of which has not been spent, set aside for future COVID-related matter.
Correct.
Now, that money's been set aside for no one really knows at the moment. It's been approved. We don't know how it'll be spent. Is that really budgeting?
Absolutely. Our plan is if it's not needed for the recovery or the rebuild, we pay down debt. What we've already seen, Luke, is if we have resurgence, we need to keep supporting our small businesses. We had 1.7 million jobs saved through the wage subsidy. Now, no one wants extra cases. No one wants that scenario, but we have to prepare. We have to have it ready and available. Unfortunately, the National Party is suggesting spending all of it. That is not wise when you're in the middle of a global pandemic and you need it for recovery.
Well, it's actually all borrowed money, isn't it? That's the thing, it's all borrowed money, so we're borrowing money to go and put it there and say one day we might need it. How about we borrow it if we need it? One of the other things to point out is that wage subsidy that Ms Ardern wants to talk about a lot, that's costing us $500 million a week. That's the same cost as the Canterbury, the new hospital in Christchurch. That's how much it costs. And that's been going on. We've now got spent, or her government has spent, there's enough money for 50 new hospitals on the wage subsidy. And I'm happy to support a wage subsidy, but it has to come to an end.
And your $8 billion hole is 8 hospitals.
And actually, Ms Ardern, you're going to talk about that. It's not 8. And the other thing is, all it means is that we have an extra year to get back into a very good level of debt.
On the budget hole, Stuff calculated that it is in fact an $8 billion budget.
Oh, you're wrong.
Now,
Sorry,
why should...
You're wrong.
I'm happy to argue the toss with you.
Well, I'm happy to give you the letter from the independent...
My point is, $4 billion has been admitted to. Why should the country trust you as an economic manager when you can't make the books?
Because when there was an error, it was admitted to. And that's something better than Miss Ardern's. Miss Ardern didn't even have a plan, and when she put out a pamphlet, what did it have in it? Another error. But it was, in that case, it was
also
well, what was it then?
Also,
it also
absolutely incorrect.
It didn't have anything to do with, I don't know.
Ours adds up, and there is not a hole in it, amounting to $8 billion.
No, it's worse than that. It's over 10.
We still do not know.
We
still do not know, from what National has proposed around their debt reduction plan, what will be cut. We still
don't need
not
to cut
have an
anything.
answer on what will be cut for the $8 billion.
There's nothing to
what
be
will
cut.
be
It's
cut
not
because
8
of
billion,
the
it's 4 billion.
inadequate
And by the
operating
way,
allowance.
we've taken it into
and
account
what will
for
be
next
cut
year.
as a result of the debt reduction plan.
Would you like me to answer? I'll tell you
Please,
what we'll
by
answer.
all means.
Okay, right. We don't have to cut anything because we just take an extra year to pay back that debt.
It does not
but what
add up.
it does, but what is missing from Ms Ardern's plan, since she brought it up, her fiscal plan, is the cost of light rail in Auckland. That's not even there.
Also
now, Winston Peters
incorrect.
says that's $15 billion. Other estimates are $6 billion. Which one is it, Ms Ardern? Which
It's
one?
also
Quick response,
incorrect.
please.
One.
Seed
Which one?
funding of $1.8 billion
Yes,
is already
and-
being accounted
and
for.
then what?
And if I may answer the question, based on the logic, based on the logic presented by the National Party,
where's the rest of it?
Where is the $10 billion for the Harbour Bridge?
Oh, that's
this
not
is
for
not
another-
a
that's
logical
not for
accounting
another 20
argument
years,
that's
come
been
on.
made, which is why we haven't levelled it.
That doesn't
we
start
have
till
followed exactly the
2028.
principles
Come
of
on.
the Treasury. Our plan adds up. Nationals does not.
No.
All right, we'll move on to tourism.
Yeah. Okay, move on to it.
So tourism has been smashed by COVID-19.
Yes,
The domestic
international.
tourism sector's done well with the as the lack of international travel has meant that domestic consumers are spending up locally, but it won't make up for the money from offshore being pumped into the New Zealand economy. Judith Collins, do we need a level of creative destruction in the tourism industry? i.e., should the goal be to nurse the sector through to the other side of COVID, or do we need to accept that the international tourism sector, as we know it, is not coming back?
Well, I think the international tourist sector is going to take some time to come back. We have to be realistic about it. But I'd say to you too, is that I was in Rotorua the other day, and that is a tourism mecca in the North Island, where people were not feeling very happy at all. And they were feeling very unhappy because they weren't even getting the domestic tourism because Auckland was still in a level 2 lockdown at that stage. But also they felt that nothing was being done for them.
So
They felt
as international tourism, should we be nursing it through COVID, or should we
well,
be
I
saying
think that
it's going to
there
be quite different?
I think that there are some times we're going to have to say that some tourist assets are going to have to go into hibernation. I think that's only realistic. We cannot continue. We can't go down this path of more and more wage subsidies and when there's no work.
Jacinda Ardern?
Well, at level 2, Aucklanders could travel and did travel,
But
and
they didn't
domestic
actually.
operators did notice.
Not last week they weren't.
And B, yes, this is a point where we are
Obviously
going to have to
haven't been there for a
reimagine the future of tourism. But there is cause for us to think about how we can build back in the aftermath of this for a sector that is exactly what tourism wants, Luke. They want sustainability. They want to be able to project ourselves into the world as a place you can come and not leave a mark behind, where you can enjoy our beautiful landscapes without doing damage to it in the process. Now's the time to reimagine tourism for New Zealand.
Thank you, Jacinda Ardern. That concludes the first section of this debate. Now I'd like to hand over to Carmel Heyman, editor of The Press, to moderate the next section. But first we have another video reader question from consultant paediatric dentist Arun Natarajan.
Kia ora. My name is Arun Natarajan. I'm a specialist pediatric dentist at the Christchurch Hospital. Every year, 8,000 kids approximately are being put to sleep for dental extractions under general anesthesia. Each operation costs about $4,000 taxpayers' money. Kids as young as 18 months old are being put to sleep for rotten teeth extractions. And it's not uncommon for me and my colleagues to actually take out all the teeth on 3 to 5-year-olds. That's ridiculous. This is a serious health problem because children having childhood cavities are being linked to developing diabetes and cardiovascular problems later on in life. Should you lead the next government, what are you going to do about the fluoridation amendment bill that's sitting at the parliament now? The WHO recommends tax on sugary drinks. New Zealand needs sugary drinks levy. What are you going to do about that? How are you going to regulate what's being shown to our kids through food marketing? Thank you.
Arun Natarajan's told us it's costing $32 million a year to pull out the rotten teeth of our children's mouths under general anaesthetic. That's 8,000 children, some as young as 18 months old. He's pleading for fluoride in our drinking water. Christchurch has never had it. Centres such as Hamilton had it and removed it. Judith Collins, in 2016, the last national government introduced a bill giving health boards the power to direct their local authorities to introduce fluoride. If you formed a government, would you ensure this bill was passed?
Well, I would actually, and I can tell you I've been on the record well before when we were in government saying that the Hamilton City Council had taken a completely gutless decision by not actually promoting this. I grew up in an area without fluoride because I was on a farm, and I look at my son who had, one filling in the whole of his youth and teenage years, brought up in the city. With fluoride. I also think too is that fluoride in terms of toothpaste is already there, which is why we've got this big program on young kids learning how to clean their teeth at school and doing that every day, and that's one of Dr. Shane Retty's absolute passions. I utterly agree with it.
Sure, and Jacinda Ardern, the Labour Party, said it supported the bill but hasn't passed. It's just been sitting there collecting dust. Do the children of Christchurch deserve fluoride in their water?
Well, I support fluoridation for keeping children's teeth healthy. And you've got a choice. You either put it in your water or you literally paint it onto children's teeth. That's the choice. And so if we all want children's teeth to be healthy, we have to start making those choices. So we didn't have the numbers in Parliament and government, obviously, to make that change.
You didn't ask us.
But you can see...
You're saying the coalition...
You could have asked us.
We weren't able to progress it, but it's pleasing to see that there is some common ground.
Well, it's always been there. Come on, it's been there since Tony Ryle was the health minister.
That wasn't intended as a negative statement. It is possible for us to actually agree on issues.
Okay.
Well, you should have asked us.
Quite right. So the agreement on fluoridation bill, that's going to get passed. Judith Collins, would you consider a sugar tax?
No. I would not.
Why not?
I actually think education is better, and I think one of the problems we have is that a lot of people don't seem to understand that sugar left on their children's teeth at night is going to rot those teeth, and actually, by the way, on their own teeth. The other thing that a lot of people don't seem to understand is that right now dental care for under 18-year-olds is already free, and yet there are around 90,000 kids who apparently aren't actually receiving that. I think those are the right numbers. It's amazing.
It is a good point. For under 18s, it is free. So we have to dig deeper. What is happening that means that our children aren't accessing free dental care and instead are having to go under anaesthetic to have them removed? One of our concerns is that we're not necessarily reaching children in rural or more isolated areas, that we need extra dental buses providing full service to reach those children. We want an extra 20 to get into those communities and make that difference.
All right. And to a sugar tax, yes or no, Jacinda Ardern?
No, because people talk about it on sugary drinks. It is in cereal. It is in tomato sauce. It is in almost every item that our children are reaching for.
By the way,
but there are things that we can do, in schools in particular. We want to roll out, and we will roll out, if re-elected, healthy lunches to 200,000 children across the country. That is part of our plan.
Okay, now I think you'll both be expecting questions on the Canterbury District Health Board. Jacinda Ardern, in 2017 you came to Christchurch and you promised to repair the relationship between the Health Ministry and the Canterbury DHB. Incredibly, in August, 7 of its top chief executives quit. The chief executive was so highly regarded, his staff gave him a guard of honour when he left. I've never seen that before. How will you restore the morale of those staff who are grieving over the loss of their leadership? Will you sack the board who accepted their resignations?
No, I won't. But I absolutely understand after David Mates has seen the DHB and that team through March 15, and of course the aftermath of the earthquakes, and played a role in supporting with Whakaari White Island. I absolutely understand the huge pressure that has been on that team. Yes, it has been tough, and rebuilding that relationship has been tough. You've seen us here putting that extra equity funding in and committing to find a sustainable way through with the clinical team and the DHB, but
without their leaders.
What Canterbury is experiencing is writ large what all our DHBs are experiencing. We have a problem with our health sector. that we have to resolve, and you have felt it acutely here, and we need to resolve it.
Judith Collins, how would you resolve this? Would you get rid of the board or the Crown Monitor that was
well, of course, well, you're right, Kamala, that 3 years ago, Ms Ardern said that they'd repair the relationship. Actually, October last year, they actually stopped negotiations with the District Health Board around the deficit. And of course, most of that deficit's caused by the fact that the Hagley building wasn't built in time in the way that they expected.
And you cannot disown what has happened here.
Having said
it is
that,
legacy.
So having
it is
that,
a legacy issue
well,
what has
actually,
happened here. You cannot disown what has happened in Canterbury.
I know you don't want to hear the truth. I know you don't want to hear the truth, Ms Ardern, but actually the Health Board was working with the Ministry of Health. The repaired relationship, well, they just wiped out that relationship, and actually that's why the senior leadership team's all gone, because they couldn't take this anymore. The Crown Monitor was brought in out of Auckland to come and sort it out, and guess what? It's ended up with the Crown having to, 2 days?
Would you keep the Crown Monitor?
2 days before this?
Would you keep the Crown Monitor?
You'd actually make sure that someone was in charge. But that was put in after, before all the issues that occurred.
And what would you do?
Well, you'd actually have to sort it out pretty fast. And the thing is, it's already been paid now. So you'd have to have the Crown Monitor while there's no senior leadership team. But the other thing that
you
would
wouldn't
have to
sack
happen,
the Crown Monitor or the board? You wouldn't start again?
We'd have to probably start again. The problem is
new
this.
Board? You're saying there would be a new board?
You'd have to start again with that relationship, because the Ministry of Health is a bully towards these district health boards, and we're seeing it up and down the country, with every district health board saying to us is they can't negotiate. Negotiation, they just stopped the negotiation under Ms Ardern.
Absolutely.
So they haven't had enough money.
And people aren't silly enough, honestly,
Judith,
Camilla. 2 days ago, Chris Hipkin turned up here and said, oh, okay, we've got a debate. I know what, we'll pay off the debt. Okay, we're not stupid.
Was it an election bribe? Jacinda Ardern, was that an election bribe?
No.
Yep. Yes, it is.
It's about making sure that the people of Canterbury have services delivered. And at some point in this conversation, we have to talk about whether we have improved the health outcomes for the people in this room. That has to be what it's about. Let's not lose sight in this debate about improving health outcomes. We know, because we have increased the amount of funding that has gone into every DHB, this one included, we know it's about more than money. We have to start hitting those hard issues. Health sector reform is necessary.
Absolutely, but when they move into their new hospital building next month...
With their car park.
With their car park, thank you.
Is it there?
They will not have a teen cancer unit. They will not have a paediatric
and I've been told that some of the issues that were previously unresolved are being worked through because of that equity funding. So let's see if we can work that through and get that Hagley building up to where it needs to be.
Yes, well, we all wish for that. Judith Collins, final question on the DHB before we move on. The Treasury itself says historic underfunding of the Canterbury District Health Boards contributed to these very financial woes we're now talking about. This year, an Infometrics report said that the shortfall in operational funding for DHBs grew every year under the previous national government. Your fiscal plan, as mentioned earlier, has only $814 million for rising costs across education, law and order, health. Can New Zealanders be confident that a government you lead will fund healthcare adequately?
Every single year that we were in government, we put more money into the DHBs. And I think the other thing too, Camilla, is to understand is that we also expected results for the people of Canterbury.
Some years there was no funding for capital infrastructure.
Yeah,
some years there was nothing. That is why we have run down hospitals in this country.
That is simply not true. Who built the new hospital? Oh, that was us. That was right. Yeah,
no,
forget about that. Why don't you?
Right. We could talk about the DHB all night, but I don't want to do that. Another issue dear to the heart of Cantabrians is our beautiful rivers and lakes. Now, 95% of them running through urban and farming areas are polluted, according to the Ministry of the Environment. Rivers that I certainly swam in as a child are no longer safe. Locals say Canterbury's Selwyn River has been Chernobylised. So despite enormous efforts by farmers who have been striving to keep up with a rolling maul of new rules and regulations, there's been almost no improvement in 10 years. Now, Labor came into government saying it was going to start to repair this damage. But freshwater scientists say these reforms, which have just taken effect in September, are a waste of paper. Judith Collins,
yes.
You have said these freshwater standards would be gone by lunchtime, or at least reformed.
They would be reformed, and as the scientists have said, they're a waste of paper. The fact is, it is not possible to have a one-size-fits-all for the whole country. The rivers of Canterbury are not the same as the rivers of the Waikato. It is very important that we have rules and regulations and standards that are applicable to the regions that represent New Zealand. And I'd also say to you that our very worst rivers are our urban rivers.
But
I think that we need to understand that. And as you rightly said,
but our urban rivers make up less than 1% of our water.
And they're the filthiest ones we have. And why is that?
So would a national government commit to nitrate levels in our rivers?
We'd be very careful about that, depending on where the region is, because what we know is that if we did that in some parts of the country, such as Pukekohe in the northern region, we would actually end up without the market gardens, or at least with about a 20% decrease in their loss, in their use.
So a market garden, as long as it's making money, can pollute our rivers. Is that what you're saying?
No, we're not saying to pollute the rivers. It's very important, the use of nitrate itself. We're not saying it would go in the rivers. Actually, it should be in the soil, actually growing vegetables. But I'd say to you that it's not possible to have a reasonable and sensible policy that covers the entire country when we have different rivers. As I said, the rivers of Canterbury are different from Waikato.
Jacinda Ardern, nitrates cap, China, America, Europe, they've got a cap and we don't have it. Ours is very high.
And you've seen our policy on nitrates, on winter grazing, on fencing, on the things that will stop the degradation, make a material difference over 5 years, and within a generation, make those rivers swimmable again. That is how long, even with these changes, it will take to repair what has been done over a number of years. You've seen our plan. On one hand, you've claimed that some environmentalists are unhappy. On the other, some are saying that it's the end, of the dairy sector as we know it. It is neither. It is a plan to make our rivers swimmable again. And what I haven't heard from the National Party is what their plan is. They said that our standards would be gone by lunchtime, ironically on the same day that they also declared they would get rid of lunch breaks for workers. So...
Well, that's not true,
I'm yet to see.
That's not true at all.
Because the status quo is not working.
Yeah,
the status quo.
Well, actually, if it's so bad, then why did you wait to the last day of Parliament to suddenly rush through regulations like that? Why didn't you put them up 2-3 years ago? The reason is you didn't want them debated.
No, that is absolutely
debated, and you just pushed it in there and said, and by the end of the day, as I recall, David Parker, the Minister of the Environment, had already changed some of them.
That is
so quite clearly they were not thought through.
That is factually incorrect.
It was just not enough work done.
3 years working alongside Dairy NZ, working alongside Fed Farmers, working alongside Council to get a plan that will stick.
Then why did you change them the same day?
And every other National Party leader had not said they would roll them back because of the amount of work that went into them until Judith Collins.
Absolutely right, that a lot of work went into it, but we've settled on a plan that sets our nitrogen limits in our rivers to 3 times what's permissible in China.
Do you really think that they are?
In China. I don't know if they follow the rules.
I'm just wondering.
No, I don't know.
Do you really think that?
Good question.
No.
Do you really think? Because I know in New Zealand we take things very seriously and we hold ourselves to very high standards. I'm sure every other country in the world does too.
All right, I'm going to move on to roading. Now, Jacinda Ardern in 2017, the Labour Party promised $100 million for public transport in Christchurch, including commuter light rail to Rolleston, which Andrew Little said would be here in a matter of years. Where is it?
And we are still absolutely ambitious for mass transit for this region. We need. Actually, I'm not going to step back from the idea of working together on a plan that the community agrees with. We're still working with Regional Council on their plan. We've funded the business case. Now it's about them being ambitious and the community being ambitious about what they want to see.
So light rail might happen?
Yes, if the community support it.
Right. Judith Collins, you've promised a 4-lane highway between Christchurch and Ashburton.
Yes.
Why is that?
because it's needed and because the people of the Canterbury region actually need it. It is an unsafe road at the moment, and it does need to be, and we've got it in our transport plan that we've announced, part of the $31 billion to
And
go
how does
transport.
building roads help New Zealand meet our climate change promises?
Oh, really well, because we're also promoting electric vehicles.
That'll
You
be
might
powered
remember-
by coal
you
fuel
might have
power
remembered-
stations.
You might have, well, you're the one that used all the coal. We actually used gas. So I think it's really important to
Not in a
remember
dry
is that
year, you
Miss Ardern promised electric vehicles, that they were going to have a third of the government fleet in it. They were going to do all these things. It would all be done by now. And do you know how many out of the 15,000 electric vehicles in the government fleet
You don't
are
need
actually
to
electric?
fleet.
How many there are? 15,000? 108. That's all she's done. 108.
Excellent
No wonder
question,
she doesn't
Colin.
like me answering it.
I'm going to pass on to Luke because environment is actually our next topic, and I think that's a perfect segue, electric cars.
Judith Collins.
Yes.
What sort of car do you drive?
At the moment, I'm getting driven around a bit more than I'm driving, but I can tell you I do actually drive a car with petrol.
So do I. Do you know which one?
Yes, I do. Oh, you want this?
Yeah. What sort of
okay,
car?
I drive a BMW.
Jacinda Ardern?
A Hyundai Ioniqs, which is an EV.
So,
because
the reason that I asked both of you, this question is that New Zealand is blessed to have abundant sustainable power. Now, private vehicles currently make up almost 70% of the nation's household emissions. Now, unlike other economies with predominantly fossil fuel generated energy, such as Australia, electric vehicles could seriously decrease New Zealand's emissions. There are currently about 22,000 electric vehicles from a light vehicle fleet of about 5 million in New Zealand. It's about less than half a percent. Jacinda Ardern, what percentage of the national fleet do you want to be electric in 10 years, and what concrete steps is your government, if you're elected, will you take to achieve it?
First thing, Luke, they have to be low emissions vehicles, not just EVs. You know, one of the things I know about EVs is that price point for them right now is out of reach of most New Zealanders. I want them to have low emission choices. I want them to have the choices of a bus. I want them to have the choice of safely cycling. I want them to have a choice of a low emissions vehicle because of standards. We are, but actually 21% of our emissions come from transport. It is not as large as people make out. And of that 21%, actually through that most significant investment in public transport of any government, we give people choice. A 60,000 plus EV car is not the only answer right now. For the majority of New Zealanders, they need good choices.
And one of the ways of actually getting the cars, particularly the second-hand cars, into the market is actually to encourage fleet cars, and otherwise the fleet buyers are the businesses, which is why we're saying to businesses, if you go and buy for your staff to use EVs, you'll be able to actually not pay fringe benefit tax on them. So that will encourage you to buy EVs as opposed to diesel or petrol sort of cars. And the other thing to say too is that if we can get a third of our vehicles in the government fleet of 15,000, if we can get them to be EVs in the next few years, that's going to make a big difference because they get turned over.
In 10 years, do you have a target?
Well, we've actually haven't gone quite to 10 years, but what we have saying is we can get a third of the government fleet. And the other thing is, just to encourage people even more to buy an EV, apart from the fleets and the businesses, is to actually let them use the bus lanes so that they can actually have a real advantage. And that's for the hybrids as well, although I've been looking a lot at EVs because I've taken this point. So I'm actually getting right at the moment a PowerPoint put in my carport because I actually don't have a garage, but I've got a carport and it's going in there because I do want to get an EV. But the other thing is, actually, I think EVs are very important, and I've been looking at them and hybrids. I actually prefer the EV to the hybrid because the hybrid seems to only go for a little while before you go into petrol or diesel, and they're actually often tougher on the environment because they're much heavier, and therefore they use up more petrol.
The opportunity here for New Zealand and our profile and climate change sits well beyond EVs. It shouldn't just be about whether or not we've got EVs in the Crown fleet, it's whether or not they're being powered by 100% renewable electricity. Now, there's no point having an EV that in a dry hydrological year is powered by coal misses the opportunity that we have. Very few countries in the world are as blessed as we are with geothermal, with wind, with solar, with hydro. We have the opportunity to green our grid, and not only that, with the potential of hydrogen, which we will have our first production in a matter of months.
When?
In Taupo, in a matter of months, through a joint venture
So why is it now
with
then?
Japan.
Oh, yes, right, okay. So
Through
let's
a,
look at
through a
coal.
Māori trust, we have the potential to export green energy. The opportunity here is enormous for us. It is a chance for us to reach our climate
been burning
targets
the coal?
and open up an
Miss
export
Ardern is the
opportunity
one
to
who's
it. It's
actually
very
burning
exciting.
the coal. She's been burning the coal, bringing it in from Indonesia to be burnt in Huntly. And the reason is because we needed to do it to keep the lights on.
We can
when I was
green
Minister
our
of Energy
grid
and
and be
Resources
without
in
Huntly.
2016-17, we actually were using then about 5% of our electricity generation was coming from coal. Actually, just a few weeks ago, it was 28%, and that's under Miss Ardern and her so-called green
Judith
electricity.
Collins, if we step back and look at New Zealand's broader place in the world when it comes to climate change, when it comes to emission reduction, should New Zealand be aiming to lead the pack and be a model global citizen, or should we be in the middle of the pack, keeping abreast with our trading partners? And what's the answer, and why?
I'll tell you what the answer is. We already are leading the pack. Our emissions of greenhouse gases are 0.17% of the world's emissions. Our farmers produce their products, their protein, what we send overseas and export at fewer carbon miles or carbon emissions than any other nation that we deal with. And why is that? Because they already are. They're grass-fed mostly. We actually have free-range cows. We don't keep them stuck in a shed all day. And one of the other things that we do, better than anyone else, is that we look to science and technology to improve that. And that is important. When you look at the great success of New Zealand agriculture and horticulture, it's mostly, a lot of it's based around not just climate or anything else, it's based around using technology and science. And that's something that we can do more of. And that's why dairying and other parts of the agriculture and horticulture area is so keen on looking to science and improving the way that we do things.
We are leading the pack, but not because our contribution to emissions is small. In fact, the opposite. But because in spite of our small contribution, we are doing our bit, which is what we need every country in the world to do if we are to tackle climate change for the next generation. We are leading the world because we have a Zero Carbon Act. We are leading the world because we are investing in having carbon budgets. We are leading the world because we stopped future oil and gas permits in New Zealand. We are leading the world because our emissions profile says 48% of our emissions will come from agriculture. And we are investing in a plan
paying the bills at the moment, Miss Ardern.
We are working with the sector to develop a plan which means we will have the technology and IP to sell to the rest of the world.
You've got nothing
what I
else to
still
sell.
do not have.
No, I don't understand this. I don't understand this.
What I still have not heard is what National's plan to tackle climate change is.
I tell you
they
what our
seem to
plan is.
disagree with every measure we have taken, and yet that's the only way we'll meet our Paris.
Ms. Ardern does not seem to understand that we have a crisis, and that crisis is the economy. When we have $20 billion is coming from dairy exports, and $20 billion is the health budget. We need to wake up to the reality. We have an economic crisis that
we need to wake up that unless we move on this, we will be left behind and we will lose our brand. It is a competitive environment. And I have to point out that dairy is doing well, and that is as we are working on these environmental issues together.
It's not just about brand, it's about the reality. And we have to pay for health. We have to pay for education. That's $17 billion a year. Understand this. There is no free lunch for us in this world. We are a little country that has to fight for every trade deal we do and every single thing. And we cannot continue to go down a path of destroying our
It is a sad day
and
when we give up on our reputation of being clean, green and carbon neutral because we are proud of it.
It's important that we have the money coming into New Zealand so we can pay for health. And we cannot continue down this path.
We're just going to change tack here. So both of you have...
Give it a go, Luke.
Both of you have stated your preference for a 4-year term. Will you join forces to make that happen, or will you let the public decide through a referendum?
Thank you for segueing to a unity moment. I think that's a positive thing. Look, I would happily, after the election, talk to Judith and the national team about a 4-year term, because I do think there seems to be consensus. Let's make the most of that.
Referendum or a vote?
And of course, I would have thought, we always have to have a referendum for a major constitutional issue like that. But I would have thought that Ms Ardern couldn't even talk to us about fluoride. So I'm not sure she's going to talk to us about anything. We'll be talking to her about it.
Good point.
And the unity moment's gone.
Well, I think that's your side. I think that's your side.
Judith Collins.
Yes, Lou.
When the Queen dies, should New Zealand become a republic?
I must say,
didn't it?
Well, that was an interesting one. I don't think so, but I think that people in New Zealand are starting to move that way, and I think it's. I personally really admire the Queen and Prince Philip, but I've got to say, I think we're moving that way, and I think the people of New Zealand will make up their own mind.
Jacinda Ardern?
Not in that moment. Not in that moment. I mean, particularly as we will be, I have no doubt, regardless of position, acknowledging the Queen. And I do think it'll be in my lifetime, but it doesn't feel like it's quite ready yet.
It won't be long.
Well, long live the Queen.
Yeah, indeed.
So talk about service.
And we have to make sure that we have, of course, the Crown, Te Tiriti. Those are issues that would need to be resolved, and they're big issues.
Thank you, Jacinda Ardern and Judith Collins. That's it for the first part of our debate. Our leaders are now going to take a 15-minute break while Stuff's Carol Hirschfeld discusses the first half action with Leanne Watson, Canterbury Employers Chamber of Commerce, and University Senior Political Lecturer Dr. Lindsay Taiata O'Toole McDonald. When we come back, we'll have questions from the audience. If you haven't dived onto slido.com, please do. Type in the code LD2020, suggest a question, vote for someone else's, or you take a break, have a walk around, and see you again in 15 minutes. Thank you.
Kia ora and welcome to what we are affectionately referring to as the halftime breakdown here at the Press Leaders Debate 2020. I'm Carol Hirschfeld from Stuff, and while our debaters and our live audience get to take a short intermission, for our online audience, we wanted to take this opportunity to gauge how Jacinda Ardern and Judith Collins are performing so far in this, the only South Island based leaders debate of the campaign. Now, joining me for that discussion are two very interested and engaged locals. Welcome to Leanne Watson, Chief Executive of the Canterbury Chamber of Commerce, and tēnā koe to political science lecturer Dr. Lindsay Taiata O'Toole McDonald from the University of Canterbury. Lovely to have you both here. Now, third head-to-head debate. Jacinda Ardern was criticised for being low energy with our first debate. Judith Collins criticised for too many interruptions. Both settled into some flinty exchanges with debate number 2, counterpointed with some points of agreement. How's their form been this evening? Lindsay, can I start with you?
Thank you, Carol, and tēnā koe. I'd just like to take a moment to say these are amazing performers, politicians and people, and they've basically devoted most of their lives to public service in the service of New Zealanders. And I think we should stop for a minute and think about that's amazing. Given the leadership around the world today, it's amazing to see such powerful women standing up and supporting the whole of New Zealand and wanting to do the best by us. So at the moment, I'm just really grateful for that.
That's a very warm and consensus-style welcome there for our leaders tonight. Leanne, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I certainly think, Carol, that both leaders have brought their A-game tonight. There's no doubt that they're both passionate. We're on the countdown to the election, and that shows tonight with lots of interjection and some really strong statements from both leaders. So I think it'll be really interesting to see in the second half. But I think ultimately some really good messaging tonight that will give the voters some more information that they need to make well-informed decisions on voting day.
I think you're quite right, Leanne. It does feel like they have brought their A game. Is it energy that is generated with having such a large audience in front of them? Lindsay?
Yes, I think so. I've always watched the last two debates with some trepidation because I'm not sure we're seeing either of them in their full potential as leaders and as speakers on a debate floor. Judith seems a little bit hemmed in by strangely needing to appeal at times to wingnuts. There seems no reason. If we could see the person that her staff love so well, and I've heard tremendous stories about what she does for people individually, I'd love to see that person. And Jacinda, it would be really nice to see her talking to a group of people naturally. She does amazingly up on stage tonight. I think in terms of sound bites, she's won a few, but on the other hand, Judith is really hitting her straps. I'm just not sure if New Zealanders really want to see the New Zealand debating chamber, the parliamentary debating chamber, on stage. And I think Judith might be falling into that trap a little bit much. A little bit much. She's point scoring without leading us.
Yeah, look, I would tend to agree. I think it's really important that what we see from Judith is to get her key messages out in front. Rather than be reactionary in responding to Jacinda. I think, you know, there's some great stuff from both leaders, but we need to see the more key messages that come out from Judith. So some real substance behind the detail. I think we've heard, you know, a huge amount of topics tonight, but we do want to hear some of the detail behind some of the topics rather than just the sound bites.
Well, picking up on your point about looking a little closer at some of those topics that have been on the table, let's turn now to, firstly, COVID. And one of the things that Jacinda responded with once she was asked directly around her government's handling of COVID, she said every leader would have wanted to move earlier. And Judith responded with National called for the borders to be closed in February. We were then being accused of scaremongering. How credible do you think they were in their responses? Leanne?
Look, I think this is an unprecedented event and there is no rule book. So, look, it's incredibly hard to look back and see what we might do differently. But I think it is wise to make sure that we do pause, reflect and consider that. We're not out of the woods yet. You know, we still have COVID in our community and the way we respond moving forward is what's now important. We do also need to take into account that we did close all of our economy down. And while there were other countries that did things differently, it's important to reflect on the outcomes that they are achieving at the same time.
Lindsay?
Yeah, it's a really hard call because I think with political leadership, you need to keep going forward. There'll be time. Look, we're still in this emergency for at least years to come, for at least a year, if not years. I think it's really interesting to concentrate on whether or not we're point scoring over it or whether or not we're building a team to face it. And both of the leaders, I thought, could have done more to say what their team looks like, how they work with their team, and really show the character, because at the end of it, we only vote once, and so we have to vote on character and past behaviour, not on some kind of policy prescription, because that's going to change in the emergency times ahead.
Leanne, you raised the fact that around the economy, obviously, our economy was slammed. Yet I can hear Jacinda Ardern appealing very directly to exporters, saying that how well they've done, saying that we are on the move, that there is return happening. Is she credible?
Look, there is no doubt that our export community has done incredibly well in COVID, particularly those well-established exporters, but we cannot discount the impact on the small businesses across our community. And we know that small businesses make up a huge proportion of our economy. I think we need to make sure that when we talk about protecting the livelihoods of New Zealanders, that also includes our business community, because our business community actually provide the livelihoods of New Zealanders. So we have to get the balance right moving forward. That's incredibly important, that this cannot just be led by a health response anymore. We have to look after the whole economy, which includes the business community.
Lindsay, you've raised your microphone. You look like you've got something to say here.
I'm just not sure that the jury is in or out on the best response in these times. What concerns me is that we have a state in full beast mode at the moment, unleashed in emergency times. And so for the voters, it's really about who's best to pull those levers, who's going to hold that state back and not let it further go into our liberties, and make the right call on when our liberties need to be changed a bit or when we can go back to the New Zealand we know and love.
Let's turn now to Christchurch. Dr. Ardern was clearly really impassioned in his plea for fluoridation here in Christchurch. How would you rate the leaders on their answers to what is obviously a long-running and bitterly contentious issue here in the city?
Well, I mean, those statistics were horrifying, and I think this is not well understood. So this is a really important issue for our community, and we need to make sure that people are well informed and well educated. Now, the fact that this is still an issue and we haven't resolved it yet, which seems like something reasonably simple, is quite astounding. So, you know, we need action. We need more action and less talking. Both leaders were united in terms of their response, so why can't we get on and actually fix this problem?
Well, Lindsay, I think we'll have to hold them to account, but because, as Leanne said, they seem to be united in agreement that this is something that should happen.
Yeah, I was strangely bemused by that response. We have the highest rate of child deprivation just about in the OECD, the least rate of elderly deprivation in the OECD. That's because the elderly get a UBI, a universal basic income. Over 65, we pay everyone. It's really time to start thinking about what we can do for our kids that really changes, because those stats are just the tip of the iceberg for our children across New Zealand. And it would be nice to see some real money going into that. As one of my friends said, it was nice to see $25 going to the beneficiaries. Why couldn't it have been 50? Why couldn't it have been 100 a week? That would be a force multiplier in our economy and make a real difference to those kids in need.
Press editor Kamala Hayman also touched on regional travel, health funding, the state of our waterways. You know, these are absolutely emotive issues for Cantabrians. What do you think, which one of them would have really resonated?
I'd just like to say that being a big fan of Ash Vegas, being able to get there quicker would be lovely. But I was really amazed on the earthquake recovery that Judith came into that knowing what Canterbury thinks of National's handling of that earthquake recovery. National nationalised our insurance and socialised our rebuild. For a Tory government, that needs some explaining, and I was really hoping we'd get a mea culpa today. We'd get some acknowledgement of what they did to our private insurance and property freedoms.
Oh, there's so much I could answer on that one, but I think, you know, there are two things. One is we have to recognise that agriculture is the backbone of our Canterbury economy. So actually, water and land management is crucial to this economy. So, you know, we need to make sure that we balance the new regulations that are being suggested by Labor and also some of the regulations that are being suggested by National with how we manage this for our agricultural economy. We need to do that in a staged and consultative way so that these communities can actually work through some of these very real challenges on the back of COVID. And I think the other issue is the health system. I mean, you know, this is incredibly challenging for us here in this community, and we've heard so much in the last couple of months around the Canterbury District Health Board and the challenge that they have faced. We know that the health community and the health sector is working with a broken model. So what are we doing about fixing that model across New Zealand rather than looking at individual DHBs and trying to fix them piece by piece? We need to fix the broken funding model.
Guys, we are going to have to wrap up now, but a very quick answer. Is one of the leaders edging ahead at the moment, at this halfway point?
Too close to call. Too close to call.
Too close to call.
The next session will be very interesting.
Leanne and Lindsay, thank you so much. And for your very thoughtful analysis. For our audience back home, we will be rejoining the debate very shortly. So please don't go away. And we will be back at the conclusion of the debate to assess how the leaders did in terms of full time. And we're hoping that you will join us again. And that will be just before they give a final media stand-up for the evening. So don't go away. Thank you so much for joining us for the Press Leaders Debate.
Right, thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Please take your seats. And thank you to Carol for your half-time analysis. This is the part of the evening where we get to hear questions from the audience. So I hope you've all had a chance to have your say. There's far, far more questions than we're going to be able to get to, but we're choosing the ones that have been voted up. So we'll get into it. Thank you. Judith Collins, will you commit to banning conversion therapy in New Zealand?
Jo, I don't know why anyone would want to do conversion therapy. You are who you are, isn't it?
That's not the question. Will
yeah,
you ban
well, it's pretty hard to actually even define it. My advice to any parents that are worrying about their kids, because it's clearly parents who are organising this, is actually just be great for your kids are alive. That's
so
what
no,
I say.
you're not going to ban it?
What I say is I'd tell people don't do that to their
No
kids
ban?
because it's very hard. I don't know what is meant when you talk about the detail, but I'm happy to say to you, to any parent, just be grateful for your child.
Jacinda Ardern, do you support the proposed cannabis reform bill?
Support every single one of the people in this room having their say, and
Oh,
whatever
come
you
on.
decide.
What's your answer?
And whatever you decide, I will
She
implement.
voted for it.
They might want
And
to
I
hear-
do think
they might want to have some leadership from you on this, Jacinda Ardern.
leadership is making sure that and not every issue has to be influenced by a political agenda.
Oh, come on,
Every
you
single
voted
vote
for
in
it.
this room counts as much as mine. And I do think that I genuinely want to hear the answer to this. I want everyone to have faith that no matter what they vote, I will implement it, whether it's a yes or no vote. I haven't heard that commitment from the opposition.
You voted for it, didn't you? You voted for it.
I've said that after it's
You voted
declared
for
that
it.
I will give
Come
my
on,
answer, but I will implement the outcome. It's a fair
we
question.
can't pressure you to give us an answer.
It is a fair question.
Every Labour minister, senior Labour ministers come out and said they voted for it. Miss Ardern voted, she voted for it.
That is not true. That is not true.
Why did you
I'm
not vote for
not
it?
whipping
Did
the
you not
Labour
vote it?
caucus.
I'm not
They
whipping
will
anything
vote
either. I can tell you right
however
now,
they
you
choose.
voted for it.
But
They're not
Judith,
asking about me, they're asking about you. They know
Judith.
where I voted against it, you voted for it. That's
Judith,
it.
if New Zealand votes yes,
Answer.
If New Zealand votes yes, will you implement
Don't
it?
ask me, I'm asking you. How'd you vote?
Judith,
I'm happy to tell you this.
If New Zealand votes yes, will you
Just
implement it?
answer the question.
Will
Did
you-
you vote for it? You don't know. Come on, you do know. You did vote for it.
Judith Collins, what is the single biggest action your party will take to address the threat of climate change?
What number one thing that we're doing?
Number one.
Is to grow the tech sector in a way that it is a rival to all the other export sectors. It's already worth $8 billion to New Zealand, and our tech policy is all about growing that sector so that we can have, obviously, smarter business, smarter agriculture,
How long
smarter
will that
everything.
take?
Actually, wait not that long, actually. It's, we're really already in a tech hub. It's called Christchurch. It's a tech centre, and it's full of really smart people doing excellent things.
It certainly is, thank you. The single biggest thing.
The Zero Carbon Act will make the single biggest difference. But we have to also, we of course have to look at every sector. You know, getting to 100% renewable electricity generation, industrial heat at the moment is a huge contributor. Helpfully, we have a plan across every single element of our emissions profile right now, and that is what's going to make a difference long term.
Plan is not doing.
And I have
Yeah,
not
plan
heard,
she's got no
I don't know how data centres are going to help climate change. You know, overall, we need a plan.
You don't
we need
understand
a plan
tech, do you?
on our current emissions
You don't understand
profile.
tech. You don't understand technology.
We need a plan
If you think it's a data centre.
for transport,
You don't understand.
industrial heat production, agriculture. Those are our major emissions.
Actually, I think I should take you to some text places. You'll understand they're not data centres.
Judith Collins, simple question for you. What does the word woke mean to you?
Oh, it actually means people who want to talk a lot of nonsense and actually never actually do it.
Jacinda Ardern.
Huge self-awareness is what I would say woke means.
All right. Jacinda, another one for you. How will your government honour Te Tiriti o Waitangi?
By recognising that Te Tiriti is not just about treaty settlements. It has to be about the relationship between Māori and the Crown. It is a living document. So we have to start looking beyond the treaty settlement process. We have to look at what we're doing to enrich and support the language, to support Māori culture and heritage, to teach our history in schools, to make sure we're supporting kohanga reo, to make sure we're supporting whānau order in health and on oranga tamariki.
Well, how come you didn't?
It is in everything that we do.
So, of course, Ms Ardern doesn't want to talk about treaty settlements because National had 56 deeds of settlement.
And again,
with
as I say, it is about much
deeds.
Much,
and by the way,
more than
under
that.
us
forward, what will you do?
Well, we'll
honour the
continue
treaty?
to that part, but we'll also continue down the rigorous role that we had in trying to get kids through school to make sure that they got qualifications. And under us, level 2 NCEA for Māori rose from 52% to 75% after our term of government. That's what makes a difference. Education.
This is an interesting one from Xavier Dickinson.
I think that's Megan Woods out there.
Judith Collins. New Zealand.
She'd be more welcome chipping in than Jerry Brownlee would be, I have to say.
Well, Jerry's a much better chippy than Megan Woods is. He actually is one.
All right. Question from Xavier Dickinson. In New Zealand, our youth have significantly lower voting rates than those who are older. What will you do to ensure young New Zealanders get out and vote?
Do you know what I think? Best thing to do is show them we're having fun. If we're having fun in politics, they might want to actually get interested. I think that's really important.
And you're having fun?
I absolutely am. Every day. Every single day.
Jacinda Ardern, our young people are not voting. What are we going to do?
We have to do something about the things that are getting them to the polls. They want to see action on climate change.
They want a car.
They want us to continue to do work on child poverty. You know, when you go into schools, we make assumptions that young people care about things that are somehow only about youth-adjacent issues. They care about the major things that are affecting the next generation. When they see us doing something about that, that makes them have faith in democracy. It makes them turn out. That's what we have to keep doing.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question. Jacinda Ardern, what will you do to work towards decreasing New Zealand's suicide rate?
We've got to go earlier and earlier with mental health support. You know, I still remember last election coming down and hearing some of the stories from children here in Canterbury and affected by the earthquakes in Kaikoura. And we heard from the educators and parents that we needed mental health support in primary schools. And so with the DHB, we created Mana Ake, and we have supported 5,000 children in schools right here in Canterbury. The sad reality is that we need that now across the country. We have to support our kids. We have to help them with tools in cognitive behavioural therapy that are going to give them what they need in the really tough world they're going into to not just survive but to thrive. And when we do that in our primary schools and we support it in our secondary schools, that is what will give us tough young adults who will survive the really anxious, making difficult times that we have in New Zealand.
Thank you. So Judith Collins, is that a good plan?
We believe that mental health is such an important issue that we should actually have a Minister for Mental Health. We've got Matt Ducey, who's the MP here in Waimakariri, and Matt is a mental health professional before he came to Parliament. I have to say, I'm sorry to say that Matt's actually had quite a lot of work to do in Parliament with mental health because, you know, Parliament is not immune to mental health issues, as we have seen. To me, that's why we're putting this big emphasis on mental health in schools. We agree with having a real effort in that. But can I also say, too, is that when we've got suicide rates of, the last time I checked, was about 675, that's twice the road toll. And those aren't even counting all of the many cases of suicide attempts. But I'll tell you what, one of the things we did in government that I would put straight back in is to have mental health workers working with the police in the custody suites. And that's something that Ms Ardern's government took out. No, they've taken out.
Well,
they've gone.
Well, we'll let the fact checker pick that one up as well.
They've gone.
Don't be quite
yes and no
I
answer. Yes and no on this is all we've got time for. Jacinda Ardern, universal basic income, good or bad?
no from us.
No from you?
It's
Universal?
It's a no from us.
No, all right, thank you. Slightly tricky one. New Zealand has an ageing population. How will you look after their needs with every policy that you implement?
Well, I'll tell you what we do think about that, which is why the tax cuts, which will give them $500 each for each superannuitant, because their superannuation is calculated at 66% of the after-tax average wage. So yeah, well, that's one thing. But also, in terms of health, we've got to have the money to pay for health, which is why I say don't destroy our export economy, grow our export economy so that we can actually...
How will Labour look after?
The best way to keep health services running is to fund health services, and for that you've got to have the money aside.
That's right.
What I do for older New Zealanders, I won't move the retirement age. We've got to give them the certainty around what they can expect in their retirement. But also, I would just ask people to look at our record. We have, for instance, introduced the winter energy payment, and I cannot tell you how many letters I got from older New Zealanders saying for the first time they kept their heater on without thinking about it. That's what I want for our older New Zealanders.
Thank you, and thank you so much to our readers. That's the questions from our audience. Luke, on to the next section.
The fifth and final section. Jacinda Ardern, Oranga Tamariki, during the last term of government, came under fire for its practice around uplifting babies that it considered at risk after footage emerged of a baby being taken from its mother at Hastings Hospital, which sparked a public shock. And a Children's Commissioner report found that newborn Māori babies were 5 times as likely to be taken into state care than non-Māori in 2019. There's been some work done in this area, but what will you do specifically for Māori families to stop their babies being taken at high rates?
No one wants a child to ever be removed from a home. No one wants that situation. And I would think actually that that's where you would get some consensus. What we've got to do is work earlier. Too often, oranga tamariki are working in the most tragic of circumstances where things have become critical. We've got to work with our families much, much earlier on preventative measures so that whānau are supported so we never get to crisis. Recently, we've just started a rollout of a program with whānau Ora that is an investment in doing just that. It will work with hundreds of families. And we continue to roll out partnerships with iwi. They're working to make sure that they're working with the whānau they know best, and that will make a difference too. Ultimately, we have a huge change program that started in 2019. It is going to take us some time to turn the ship around, but I'm very positive that we can do it.
Judith.
So what's really important, as I think we can all agree, is that children should not be at risk in their own homes. And one of the things that we've put in place as a policy is the first 1,000-day policy. We've been criticised by some people for putting so much money and effort into children, all children in the first 1,000 days. But that's really important. That's actually about getting mothers the help that they need, the assistance they need. But also, let's be frank here. Social workers don't go running around trying to pick up kids out of homes because they're not needed to do. I am distraught every time I hear, yet again, of another child being killed or seriously injured in their home. And I'm never going to say to social workers at Oranga Tamariki, don't do your job because you're worried you're going to get a backlash. I tell you what, I don't want kids killed in their own homes or growing up frightened and beaten. It is simply not good enough, and I don't think any politician would ever wish that.
So your main concern would be making sure the children are safe, regardless of background?
Absolutely. A child always has to come first.
Jacinda Ardern?
Oh, I think everyone wants every child to be safe, but again, we have to start much, much earlier to turn around what has often been a whole host of issues over decades. So these won't be simple issues.
So why do you
I don't think anyone either disagrees with investment in the first 1,000 days. You know, that's why we, for instance, extended paid parental leave to support families in those early years. It's why we brought in the Best Start payment, which is the first time since the 1990s we had a universal payment that recognised that in those early days we need to support families to have the choice of being with their children. Unfortunately, the National Party is proposing to cut Best Start, which will be a real loss to what I think is a significant change.
It doesn't make a scrap of difference, paid parental leave to families who are not working. What we really do need to do is to put the effort in straight away with mothers and babies, and also understand, if you thought so much about it, Ms Ardern, why did you get rid of social investment? The single biggest effort that was being put in to help families through this and to prevent children being harmed.
On whether or not we just heard Judith say that she doesn't believe in the extensions to paid parental
now
leave.
that's not true. I said, for families who are not working, it doesn't help to have paid parental leave.
And Best Start does, and you're planning to cut it.
We're putting in
Best
1,000
Start matters
days.
to every family, and you've proposed cutting it.
We've got the first 1,000 days is where the child is most going to get a benefit, and also the mother. It is really important to understand.
You both agree on first 1,000 days, disagree on how to do it.
Yep, I think
so
that's
let's
fair.
move on and turn to the cost of living. Now, what we're going to do is very quickly run through a quick fire round of questions to see how in touch both of these leaders are with some basic household items.
Oh, right. Okay.
Jacinda Ardern, how much is 2 litres of milk at the supermarket?
About $4.50.
Nah, $6.
At both New World and Countdown today, it was $3.40.
Oh, good deal.
$2? 2 litres?
2 litres.
Oh, God.
I
think we're getting ripped off.
That's the home brand.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah, right.
Okay. Judith Collins, how much is a 2-kilo leg of lamb?
Ooh, 2 kilos. I'd probably, is that like that size?
Yeah, like a leg.
That size? Oh, that's probably about $28. $30?
Oh, I would say about $20.
$42.
Oh, at least I'm closer.
My metric.
I've got to say, I normally buy when it's on sale, special.
Jacinda Ardern, how much does the cheapest Netflix plan cost per month?
I believe it's $11.99.
Judith Collins?
Yeah, it's about that, and I can tell you I haven't watched any lately. I've been too busy.
You are both correct. Congratulations. How much is a weekday edition of The Press? Judith Collins.
Too much. Jerry Brownlee says. Jerry says it's too much.
Jacinda Ardern?
I don't know.
$2.80. Now, a couple of salary questions.
We get ours online.
Jacinda Ardern, what is a starting primary teacher's salary?
A starting primary teacher is in the, since our increases.
Come on.
The late 40s, my recollection.
And it's about that, and after about 3 years, I think it's about 63, something like that.
It's about $49,800.
To start with, but after 3 years,
And
about
Judith
63.
Collins, what's the starting salary of a registered nurse?
It's not much more than that. It's in the 50s.
Jacinda Ardern?
I know that after a couple of years you get up into the early 60s.
You get up to 60s, 70s.
$54,000,
it is higher than
according to the government's careers webpage.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're going to move on to housing, and we have a video question from one of our readers about the state of New Zealand's housing market.
Hi, I'm David from LJ Hooker Ponsonby. House prices in Auckland are currently 8.6 times the median income, 6.8 in Wellington, 5.4 in Christchurch, and 7 times in Dunedin. I've seen multiple first-home buyers struggle to cross the line. My question to you is, will you reduce house prices, and how will you go about doing so?
Jacinda Ardern.
We have to increase supply. That's how we make a difference, no matter where you are in the country, to house prices. Very different discussions around how we do it between the political
What are
parties.
you going to do? Give us your quick bullet points of your top 3 things you're going to do to increase housing supply.
We've got to make sure that our residential developers are still building. So things like our underwrite scheme, through COVID, will make sure we don't have what we had during the GFC, which was a dip. We will continue to support progressive home ownership, and we will continue with Kiwi Build. We will also continue to build. We will also continue to build state houses to rebuild the stock that we lost under National. And finally, the urban policy the national policy statement on urban development is the planning tool that will make a difference to councils across the country. It says you need to build up and out if you have the infrastructure. We've also supported the financing to do that too.
Number one, get rid of the RMA. Number one thing. Second, we will not waste taxpayers' money and people's
hopes on Kiwi Build. There should be 16,000 homes now, according to Ms Ardern from the last election. In Kiwi Build, there's 585 last time I checked. That's a shame. We've got houses built at Pegasus that can't sell, and by the way, they're not good enough to be able to fit into the State House dimensions that they're supposed to have. Also, by the way, at Wanaka, all these houses built, no one to buy them.
Your policies?
We're not going to do that. So happy to talk to you. I've just said you get rid of the RMA. The other thing is we'll do what we did in Christchurch, and that was to actually do mass consenting, get houses built. We ended up with a situation in Christchurch where, until actually a change of government, the house prices had actually stabilised. And they've gone up 13% in the last year.
9 years and no changes to the RMA.
Actually, we did make changes. I don't know where you were those days.
The state housing stock.
No, that's
9
not
years
true.
and they allowed foreign buyers to continue to buy our houses.
And what's
9
happened?
years.
And what's happened?
And they did not close the tax loopholes for speculators. 9 years equals a housing crisis
that's not
that
true.
we are still trying to turn around.
Even if, Jacinda Ardern, even if house prices stabilised, compared to wages growth, it will take decades for houses to come back to something like 3 times the median income. Is it acceptable to wait for decades?
No, it's not.
Then
and
why
that's
haven't
why
you done
we
anything?
are using.
Where's
That is
Kiwi
why
Build?
we have to use every tool. It's not just about planning. It's also about helping first home buyers get over the deposit hurdle. And we've done that by adjusting our home loan support schemes. It's about things like progressive home ownership that also gets over those barriers. Look,
how can
a
you
decade-long
even, Ms.
problem
Ardern,
we are
even
not
talk
going to
about
fix
it
in
when
3
we now
years.
have
But I
20,000
am not
people on the
going to
State
give
House
up
waiting
trying
list.
and making sure first
20,000
home buyers
people.
access our housing
It's gone up
market.
4 times.
Jacinda Ardern.
No, it's gone up 4 times. The State House waiting list when we left office was 5,000 families.
Because
now
we
it's almost
don't cut
20,000
people off it
families.
like you do.
20,000 families are waiting for a home under Ms Ardern. 20,000 people needing state assistance.
And how
now,
many
how
did
can
you
she
sell?
even mention it? And when I look
6,000.
at this, they've built 5,000 state houses, actually all consented, started, funded under us. By the way, she's got nothing left in the tank. She's got nothing left in the
The
tank.
fact check is going to be very busy
The
tonight.
fact she's got Phil Twyford and Kiwi Build, come on.
All right, thank you, Judith Collins. Thank you, Jacinda Ardern. A very lively debate,
Yes.
which I did think you found some agreement on some points, which was heartening. We are now just going to have time for your closing statements. Judith Collins, you've got 2 minutes.
Right, this is the most important election in a generation. We are going to need to think much further out than just the election date. We have to think about our kids and our grandkids. We've got a fiscal plan from us that gets us back to a reasonable level of debt at 36% by the year 2034. We've got a pamphlet from Ms Ardern's party that actually has no pathway back out of massive debt. And that debt needs to be, which we know we're going to need to borrow, it needs to be about building our economy. It needs to be about building houses, building infrastructure, building the roads we need, and not having this talk about whether or not it's public transport or private transport. It should be both. And for people in the rural and provincial New Zealand, actually private transport is going to be part of the solution. And yes, we will have to toll some big roads, but people don't mind because they're getting there faster, and by the way, they have choice. That is important to do. In Auckland, it's about putting the second harbour crossing under Auckland in 2 tunnels, one for trains and the other one for roads and buses, because most public transport is by buses, and they, strangely enough, run on roads. It is absolutely important too that we boost the economy by giving people some more choice, to giving them some more of their own money back. And we can do that because we have a plan. And that's one of the problems with Ms Ardern's party. They're very ready to point holes and pick holes in our plan, but their own plan is basically non-existent. One of the things I'd like to ask Ms Ardern, and anyone should ask, is what's the cost of the light rail in Auckland? She's talking about $1.8 billion as a seed money. Actually, what's the actual cost? We know what it is. It's probably more $6-8 billion, or Winston Peters says 15. We can't afford that sort of laissez-faire, leave it all alone, don't worry about it, just throw the money around. This is not monopoly money. It's money our kids and grandkids have to pay back. Vote National Party vote.
Thank you, Judith Collins. And the final 2 minutes goes to you, Prime Minister.
Look, this evening, no matter how short-lived the unity moments may have been, I consider New Zealand very lucky and all of us very lucky to be here. And in amongst the debate that you've heard tonight, really the question we're facing this election does boil down to a very simple one. Who's better placed to keep New Zealand safe, and who's better placed to get us on track to recovery? Now, you've seen what the Labour team have delivered during COVID-19, and you've seen where it's landed us relative to the rest of the world. Now, we didn't get those results by chance. As a government, we made decisions and had a plan. We went hard and we went early. When issues cropped up, we fixed them. Everyone has played a role in that success. But of course now, together, we've set ourselves on a strong recovery. But now we need to make the most of that economic head start. And there is too much at stake to risk political disruption and a change of direction. When parties are focused on themselves, they can lose sight of what really matters. Right now, we need strong, stable government and a clear path forward. That's what I'm offering, and that's what Labour's offering. Now, we're already rolling out our plan for the economy. It's about getting jobs going through infrastructure. It's about training apprentices for tomorrow's jobs. It's about supporting small businesses to grow and to innovate, and it's about supporting our environment too, all while keeping us safe while scientists work on vaccinations. Together, over the past few years, we have cleared, and you have cleared, some really high hurdles. My hope is one day we'll look back on this period and know that we built the foundations for New Zealand to be better and stronger. Your vote's a chance to cement that. So, let's stick together and let's keep moving.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Judith Collins. Thank you, Jacinda Ardern. What a fantastic debate. Really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who's come here tonight in Utautahi, Christchurch, and to everyone who's watching online on Stuff. And I also want to thank the magnificent Stuff Events team, everyone at Keo, at the Christchurch Town Hall who made tonight's event possible. I'm so glad we're in level 1 and we could all come together for this. Now, if you're online, I just want a quick word to mention that we will keep going with a post-match debrief with Carol Hirschfeld. But to our absolutely magnificent live audience, I've really enjoyed the energy in this room, and I know you've enjoyed the debate tonight, I can tell. But thank you very much for coming. The show is over. Let us know what you think. Good night.